Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. I'm working on another Christmas card for you, actually two. So get comfy and let's get crafty. I picked up the Altenew Winter Wreath bundle. So this has a stamp and die set. It has a 3D embossing folder and coordinating layering stencils. So I am going to do two things with this. This is the first time I have used this bundle. I want to make two cards. One where I use the dies and one where I use the embossing folder. I haven't tried yet to see if I can use the dies and the embossing folder both. Maybe we'll try that again another day. So my first plan of action is to take this stamp, the wreath stamp, and stamp it onto two pieces of Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 80-pound cardstock. I am going to be inking these up with Altenew's Jet Black ink, and I've placed that down in the left-hand corner of my Misty Stamp Positioner. I will need to stamp it 2 times at least because, again, this is the first time I've used this stamp, so it's not going to have a great stamped impression the first time out the door. So I'm just going to make sure that my paper is in the Misty tight, or, kind of snug down in that corner, so that when I restamp it, I can not have any double stamping or goofed up edges or anything, because even with the Misty, sometimes I have boo-boos. I am using an entire selection of Altenew inks as well for this card, or these two cards, and it just kind of worked out perfectly. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp this down on both panels of my Neenah cardstock. Once I have the first one done, I can set that off to the side to dry and pull in my second piece of cardstock. This was the first new Christmas stamp thing I have purchased since like last Christmas season. Yeah. In fact, I have gone this whole 2022 buying very, very few new stamp products, new card making products. I have replaced things like adhesive, and I have purchased some pattern papers, but we don't talk about that because we already know I have an issue with pattern paper. But this is the first Christmas bundle that I purchased for this year, and I love it. I'm kind of all about a good wreath. So the layering stencil has an all-out guide about how you lay them down. There is the branch, which is brown, 3 layers of green, and 2 layers of red. So there are 4 stencils. Each stencil is etched with a number in the top right-hand corner, and 2 stencils have 2 different images to use on them. I have pulled out my Tonic Studios ink blending mat to work on, just so that I don't get ink on my glasswork surface and then rub my hand through it and jack up my card front, because I would. And I am going to use a little bit of low-tack tape to tape down my panel of paper, and I'm also going to use a piece to hold my stencil in place once I figure out which way is right side up. And just a hint, the number and etched name in the top right hand corner, that's mostly up. I just didn't stamp it very good, so all right, I am starting with the berries, and the first color I chose is the Altenew something about berries, let me look it up, Coral Berry. There we go. It's Coral Berry ink. And the second berry color I am using is Grapevine, I think. I'm just going to take a little scrap piece of paper and clean out my brush because I only have one red brush. So I didn't want to, it wouldn't really have mattered going from light to dark, but definitely going from dark to light, I like to clean out my brush. Okay, the second stencil has the branch and the leaves. But I decided I wanted to do the leaves before the branch because it was a little bit hard to tell where that branch was supposed to line up. And I figured once I had all the leaves blended or colored in, then I could more easily line up the branch part of the wreath. The lightest green I'm using is Frayed Leaf, then Forest Glades, and Evergreen. So I'm just using 3 shades. In fact, I think those 3 shades came in the same mini cube set. Isn't that funny? When I purchased some Altenew inks a hot minute ago, like a long time ago. Okay, this is the third stencil, and it is the mid-tone green leaves. I did have a little bit of an issue with I don't know if my ink pads are getting dry or if my blending brush was dry. I did have kind of an issue keeping it wet enough to blend that ink in. But whatever, I got the job done. It just took a little longer than I thought it would or should take. I don't have a lot of ink pad refills, so I just go with what I got. And this is the 4th stencil, and it is the darkest of the leaves. And again, that color is Evergreen, Altenew's Evergreen ink. And now, like with the darker ink, and because I'm, 2 layers into it, it seems to be blending on better. So I kind of decided that it was probably my blending brush was too dry. For the wreath, the branch part of the wreath, I used the dark chocolate ink from Altenew. And I'm just going to pull out my brown blending brush, and there's not a lot of it. It's just a little branch, but it kind of finishes off the image. Okay, image 1 down, we are going to zoom speed through the second ink blending of, the ink blending of my second panel. And since I already have my brown ink out, I'm going to start with the branch this time, especially because now I kind of sort of know where it needs to go. Once I have the branch ink blended, I am going to go back with the berries. I did clean the darker red ink off of my brush. And now that it's a little bit wet, it does seem to be blending a little bit better, like I said before. I use the same colors, coralberry and grapevine and leafy green or frayed leaf, forest glades, and evergreen are the greens that I used. And I'm just kind of zooming through that. I will say that it is definitely a little bit easier after you've done it once, just because you kind of sort of know where those stencils are supposed to line up already. And yeah, super easy. Once I have these all ink blended, I will go rinse off and dry off my stencils real quick, and then we'll move on to phase 2. So for card number 1, phase 2, I want to put it through this coordinating 3D embossing folder. I did take a couple of minutes to line up the stamped and ink blended image into the embossing folder, maybe a little bit more than I needed to, but I wanted to make sure it was lined up properly. And I have pulled out my Spellbinders Platinum die cut machine and put it on top of my desk. I do not do this very often because it's bigger than my camera range is. I am going to be using the regular standard platform. I do not have the embossing pad they suggest using for the 3D embossing folders. So I just put the platform down, the embossing folder with the paper, and then I put a regular plate over the top of it. And I think it did a fabulous job. Fabulous job. So the second wreath, I'm going to cut out with the coordinating dies. And I will try and line that up as much as I can on camera. It's kind of a little fiddly and it's a weird angle. I apologize. It's not super hard to figure out, except that I wasn't paying attention when I pulled the die off of its packaging, so I didn't know which way was actually up. So there is that. And my phone is kind of beeping. Sorry, forgot to put it on silent. But I'm going to go ahead and tape this down, and then I will run it through my die cut machine. So I've taped it down with a piece of often used painter's tape. It's just a low tack tape. I don't want the die to shift and ruin all of that ink blending and stamping that I've done. Sorry, words are hard. Allergies are killing me. I'm all congested and phlegmy and gross, and so sorry. Anyway, now that I have cut that out, I can go ahead and pop that die cut out of the cardstock, and it kind of just fell right out. It was perfect. And it is a super cute element. There's not a ton of extra white space. There's lots of places where they've cut out all of that extra. And you can see from the back of this card panel how deep and textured that embossing folder is. Okay, so now I have to figure out what to do. I did not have a hard plan. So my next step rather, was to find a coordinating piece of cardstock for a card base. And I found this dark green, it's like a dark evergreen green in my cardstock stash. And I took one piece of paper and cut it in half long ways to make 2 card bases. And now I'm scoring them in half at the 5.5 inch mark to create 2 top folding US A2 size cards. So that's the easy part. I did fold one of them in half right away because I kind of sort of had an idea maybe. And the other one, I went back and forth about whether or not I wanted to fold it down yet or what I was going to do. I think I want to stick one of these card panels through another embossing folder, but yeah, not sure. Not sure. I still, when I was folding these up, did not really know. Like this looks nice. It's a little bit plain Jane. So I know I need to do something to that card front. So I am going to go ahead and fold that on the score line. And then I decided to, yeah, go ahead and go dig through my embossing folders and find another embossing folder to put that on. And the one I chose was another 3D embossing folder from Altenew. This is the window slats. And it kind of makes that vertical blind look on your cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and position my card base into that embossing folder, and then off camera I will run it through my machine. I want to make sure that it's in straight because it will be obvious if it's not, and I want to make sure that I don't put it in farther than the crease of my cardstock. I don't want that embossing going onto the back edge at all. So it did take a minute to take care of that, and I ran it through my machine, and now I'm ready to assemble this card. So now that I have a little bit of texture in the background there, I'm a little happier with my wreath. So I just need to put it onto my card front. But I decided instead to first go and add some more elements. So this stamp and die set also came with a banner and some sentiments that fit inside the banner. So I am going to go ahead and use that jet black ink and ink up that banner stamp again. And I'm going to stamp 2 of them. And then I will pick 2 separate sentiments to go inside the banners. Now, the first time I stamped it wasn't great because, again, brand new stamp. So I did go ahead and stamp that one twice, but the second banner only needed 1 stamping. I did not have to push down very hard. I was also being very cognizant that this is a very fine line, and I didn't want to smear it or make it bulge or warp or anything. The paper I'm stamping on is not exactly cut straight on one edge, so I did find it easier to flip it back over on the straight edge and nestle it into that top left corner of my Misty. I chose 2 stamps, sentiment stamps, and stamped them inside the banner. I did not get them perfect, but because the banner's kind of tilted, I can finagle it to look straight. So here are my 2 sentiment strips, and I forgot to zoom back out after showing you that. And I am going to add my wreath down with some 3M foam tape. So I do have a piece of foam tape here that I've cut off my big, huge roll. I've added it to the back of the wreath and removed the backing paper. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball center this onto my card panel. If you've been here before, you know that I don't measure the things. I just eyeball them. And sometimes they look fine and sometimes they look crazy, but whatever. It is what it is. I am going to add a little bit of glue to the end, each end of this banner, and kind of lay it across the top of my wreath. And then I decided it might need a little bit of foam tape in the middle to keep it from getting squished in the mail. So I added a little rectangle of foam tape right in the middle of the banner and replaced the banner across the wreath. And for a minute, that one is done. I am going to go ahead and put a piece of, oh, sorry, I skipped that part. I decided to jazz it up a little bit and pull out my Wink of Stella glitter pen. And I'm adding a little bit of glitters to the berries because, you know, why not? It's a Christmas card. It have a little shimmer everywhere, right? So now I am going to put a piece of white copy paper on the inside of my card base so that I have a place to write a message. And I decided to use another of the sentiments from this stamp set to stamp inside the card just for a little bit of a Christmas wish, you know, a little Christmas message. I think I mentioned on my one of my other Christmas card videos that I send out about 100. And so it's nice to have a sweet message in there so I don't have to think of something to say every single time. I know, I'm lazy like that. Okay, so this card panel is the embossed panel, and it is 4 inches by 5¼ inches. It gives me a little bit of a frame. I am going to pop that up onto my green card base with foam tape as well. So I've just cut a strip off of my big roll of foam tape. and go ahead and, edit that out because that's boring. You don't want to watch that. And remove the adhesive or the backing tape and eyeball center that down into my card base. And it's probably not exact, but it's good enough for a beautifully handmade greeting card. I am going to add the other banner to my greeting card, or to my wreath, and I'm using foam tape to pop that up again so it doesn't sag. And one thing about this panel is I got a little bit of brown ink on it somehow. And I decided to pull out these red sequins and cover it up. So I'm putting a little dot of a little dot will do. I'm putting down a little dot of glue right on top of that brown ink smudge that you can't really see on camera, but you can in real life. And then I am adding a couple of sequins to the front of the card. I am putting 2 on the top and 1 on the bottom. That creates that visual triangle that is so pleasing to our brain and our eye, as well as having it an odd number. So then I decided, well, if sequins are good enough for the first card, they're going to be good enough for the second card. So I just mimicked that same layout, 2 on top, 1 on bottom, creating a visual triangle again, using my jewel picker and my tweezers to kind of hold those in place. And I'm adding the copy paper to the inside of my card base. I will also be stamping another sentiment from the stamp set into the inside of this card as well. And then we're about done. So we are only in like the second week of October, and I've got a couple of Christmas cards. Like this is my 3rd Christmas card video, I think. So not doing too bad. I tell myself every year that I'm going to make 1 Christmas card a month all year long, and I never do it. So then I have to mass produce and overproduce the whole rest of the year. So here is a zoom in so you can see those sentiments and a couple of close-ups of the cards. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you really enjoyed this next Christmas card video. I have added a couple of other videos here for you to watch, as well as a subscribe button. If you have not already subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did so. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and have a really great day.